want to talk about a vintage magazine that unfortunately only went for 4 issues, and that was a UK magazine. It was called the Western Magazine, and it was the brainchild of 2 friends of mine, David Whitehead, who is better known as the author of Ben Bridges, and Mike Stotter. As I say, it came out in 1980, and it filled a gap over here in the UK because we didn't really have any magazines on the newsstand devoted to the Western. The first issue here has a great cover there, and what I always find amusing these days looking at vintage magazines is the ads. There we have Rothman's cigarettes. You won't find cigarette adverts in magazines anymore. You open the book up, you've got another cigarette advert straight inside, Players number 6. I remember those, 10 number 6, my nan used to smoke. You open the magazine up, it was published by IBC Magazines from King's Reach Tower, and this is cover dated October 1980, and the introduction, which is written by the editor, who was Dennis Winston, says that man's love affair with the West mirrors his love of life itself. To the Old West was the last great chance to prove himself to himself. Those who went there made their own rules, and no 2 men were the same. The covers of all 4 magazines are really cool. There's the first cover, issue 2. Here we are. Issue 3 and issue 4 featured Eastwood, probably the Western icon, the biggest Western icon of the last century next to John Wayne. Now, the contents of the first issue is a talk on dime novels. Then we got Women of the West, then we got Shootout at Albrook's, then we've got an Edge story. Now Edge, I've talked about Edge in previous videos. Edge was a character created by George G. Gilman, Terry Arknett, and I've also got a connection to Edge because the Edge books were out of print for a long time. And I was originally brought the Edge books back into electronic print with Edge the Loner. I was intending to do the entire series, but my own writing took over and I didn't get the time, and someone else took over then. But as you say, so we've got a brief history here of the dime westerns. Throughout the magazines there are a lot of advertisements for Western related stuff. You've got Western type socks there. But you know, that's how magazines managed to survive, not only from the revenue taken in from sales, but also from the adverts. There's Joe Skelton's Western Store, which was in Leigh-on-Sea in Essex, and they sell a range of Western clothes there. I don't know if I ever saw that on the high street in the 1980s. There's another Western clothing store advert for a catalogue there. We've got a story in here from G.T. Edson, of course. G.T. Edson, probably the most prolific of all British Western writers, and one of the most successful. Arguably it was G.T. Edson and George G. Gilman who was the most successful. Yet more tobacco adverts there, the Virginian. This is a really cool advert because this is what we used to call back in the day a music centre. So there was a record deck, a cassette deck, and a radio and an amplifier all built into one, and this is a Libero 3000. Look at that. Look at that. Retro 1980s chic. There's an interesting article in this magazine in the first issue, written by Peter Newark, about the Apaches, human tigers. It's a really cool article, and there's some lovely photographs, period photographs. As I say, the Western magazine was a mixture of fiction and fact, as well as film and book reviews. It was really interesting. If we look at issue 2 here, again, the Rothman's advert on the back. Contents inside tell us that this time we've got fiction, Hearn the Hunter, by John G. McLagans. We've got a Morgan Cain story. We've also got a McAllister story by Matt Chisholm. The contents of this are The Winning of the West, Man and Myth, which looks at Wyatt Earp, and tries to separate fact from fiction. We've got a lovely article on the Winchester 73, which was an iconic Western gun. I'm going to dig that out a minute just to... Lovely drawing of the Winchester here showing the inner workings. This was a great magazine, and it's a pity that it didn't last longer. But then, you know, to compete on the newsagent stands every month, you know, when the Western during the 1980s was a niche genre, really. You know, it had its fans, but probably not enough to support what must have been quite an expensive magazine to produce. So issue 3 then, which was published in December 1980, as in terms of fiction, it has a Bodie the Stalker story, 5th section in this issue, sections on Billy the Kid. So let's look at that up, because I've always been interested in the story of Billy the Kid, and this focuses on some of the various screen versions of the Billy the Kid story. You've got 1930s year Billy the Kid, played by Johnny Mac Brown. You've got 1935 with Buster Crabbe, remember Larry Buster Crabbe of Flash Gordon fame, and it goes right up to 1972, Dirty Little Billy, 1958, The Left-Handed Gun, of course, with Paul Newman. It's really interesting, you know. It's a pretty good magazine, you know. It's very interesting. It's full of... Anyone who's a Western fan is going to love this magazine. And of course, if you like cigarette and tobacco adverts. But I'm looking at the book film reviews here for the 3rd issue, and it reviews the Great Northfield, Minnesota raid. Book reviews here, you've got Gringos 3 by J.T. Sandon. You've got Wild Times by Brian Garfield. Brian Garfield, of course, was the author of Death Wish. Gunfighter's Return by Max Brand. Two of a Kind, Edge Meets Steel by George G. Gilman. And these were a number of books that George G. Gilman did, which pitted his two most successful heroes, characters, anti-heroes really, which was Edge and Adam Steele. I never really liked these team-up books that much, to be honest with you. Let's see what the reviewer Buck Stanley says of this. He says, George G. Gilman's two principal characters, Adam Steele and Edge, have an army of fans, and doubtless readers of one series avidly avoid the other. So the meeting of these two heroes will be a major event for them. Name's Steele, announces Adam. Edge, fella, is the guarded reply. Steele suggests that perhaps they were made for each other, but Edge is not convinced. Maybe, but after you shot my horse, I ain't so keen on you. And there we must leave it to the reader to find out what follows. That splendid exchange. The final issue of the Western magazine with the Clint Eastwood cover did actually feature a short story centered on Adam Steele. Adam Steele, of course, was also written by George G. Gilman, who we talked about, who had the Edge story in the earlier issue. The contents of the final issue. We've got the Adam Steele story. We've also got another story called Deadly Quarrel at Springfield. We've got an Arc the Regulator story and a Sudden story towards the end of the book. There's an article on Clint Eastwood, billed as the man who put the meat into spaghetti westerns. The Man and Myth section in yours looks at Jesse James in Fact and Fiction. There's an article on the immortal Bowie knife. There's an article on the Sharps, billed as the King of Rifles. Again, these are wonderful drawings which show the inner mechanism of the weapon. Advertisements in here for replica guns and Western clothing, and also an album that was current at the time. I've got this album, and I've got this on vinyl, like The Legend of Jesse James, using the voices of Johnny Cash, Emily Harris, Charlie Daniels, Levin Elm. I've actually got that on vinyl. It's quite a cool album. It was a follow-up to an album called White Mansions, which centered on the American Civil War. So that's the Western magazine. It was an interesting, short-lived magazine. Now, this magazine goes for crazy high prices on eBay from time to time, but if you keep an eye out, sometimes you can get them at a bargain. I purchased all mine from eBay, and I paid about £3 to £4 each. Not too bad, but I have seen them going up for £15-20 each, so keep an eye out for that. That's the Western magazine. It's highly recommended. Not only is it a time capsule of, you know, the 80s and featuring cool music centres from the day, adverts for tobacco and cigarettes, but it's just a great magazine. It's lovely to have, and most of my issues are complete except the fourth one, the Clint Eastwood cover. Has got a lot of things that have been cut out. Someone there tried to join the Western Book Club. There would have been a coupon there you can cut out to join the Western Book Club, and they've done that. Gits. Well, anyway, I hope they enjoyed their books, mind. But there are several other adverts that they've also cut out, and they've also done the word search. So that's the Western magazine. Well worth seeking out.